probably practicality. It's a very small country, and they don't have any illusions about their importance in the world.
They're extremely social in terms of their government. Not that I would particularly like to have the government take care of me from birth to death. That's what they do.
Well, I'm Hans Gregersen.
I'm Erik Gregersen. I'm Hans's older brother. We both live in Solvang on our family ranch that's been in the family since 1913. We had 2,200 acres for many, many years till my father's generation passed away. We sold 1,600 acres, and my brother and my cousin and I kept the nicest 600 acres on the ranch. What I do is I fix broken water lines on the ranch, which is not necessarily enjoyable. But I also spend a lot of time with the Elverhoy. I'm passionate about trying to help to record and preserve the history of the Danish community here. I spend a lot of time on land conservation. I'm on the board of the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County. I'm on the councils of the California Rangeland Trust, which is part of the Cattlemen's Association, and it conserves rangeland all over the state of California. And I'm trying to do as much as I can to preserve what we have before it's gone. Once it's gone, it's gone.
I spend my time writing about deforestation, about global forest development. I'm involved with two people who are working with me on these policy papers for the new, the United Nations has just gone into the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development.
The history of this ranch is very interesting. In 1821, the Mexicans took control over the California territory. Between 1821 and 1845, they made a number of land grants to Mexican government employees, and one of them was the 26,600 acre Rancho San Carlos de Jonata. In 1845, became part of the state of California in 1851. And in 1867, they sold the 26,600 acre parcel to the Buell family. They owned the ranch until 1877, when they had a drought, which is similar to the one we have now. They couldn't pay the bank. The bank assigned the 8,882 acres to Santa Barbara Land and Water Company to resell. It sat from 1877 to 1911, when it was bought by the Danes, who came here to start a Danish community and a Danish high school. And that's when my grandfather came here. Started out as a typesetter for the Danish paper in the U.S., lived in West Denmark, Wisconsin. He then became a Danish Lutheran minister. And so he was very, very firmly connected to the Danish culture and religion and everything else. He was one of a group of 3 Danes who wanted to start educating people in this climate. They all came from the Midwest, and they were all fed up with the cold climate there in the wintertime and the hot, muggy climate in the summertime. And they spent 6 months traveling up and down the West Coast looking for land, finally decided to buy this land here. And then they started selling land to Danes who wanted to come and move into this area and do farming and ranching here and participate in the education at the folk high school, as they called it.
So these folk high schools had a little bit of religious teaching. They had, teaching of the basic principles of being a good citizen and being socially conscious. And I think he was very committed to that.
My mother's father, we remember very well.
Oh, yeah.
Because he lived until he was 93 years old. He came from Denmark in 1917 with his 5 kids. right before the First World War. You could see the World War coming. And he immigrated from Denmark. He was a mill owner.
It was not only a mill, it was the king's mill.
Yeah.
But he was in the king's Danish dragoons, and one of the guards of the king.
And when he came over here, he did a number of things, but he ended up being the Danish vice consul in Seattle, Washington.
Well, my profession was in natural resource economics. I had a forestry degree, then I went on and got a sociology degree, and then I found my passion, which was economics, and combined the forestry and watershed management with economics in the early days of that profession. And it opened up all kinds of career opportunities.
Studied mechanical engineering, graduated from Cornell in 1961. Went to work for Procter & Gamble for a year and a half and decided I didn't want to be an engineer for the rest of my life. So I went back to business school and got my MBA.
I got this job in the United Nations in Rome, where I lived for 4 years working with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. And during that time, I did a lot of consulting with the World Bank, which of course is another UN agency, and the Inter-American Development Bank, etc.
I was with a large corporation for 15 years, and one of my assignments was managing director of their South African subsidiary. We did all kinds of commercial machinery, especially in the food processing, fresh fruit and vegetable packaging.
When I came back to the States, I finished my PhD and got offered a job at the University of Minnesota, setting up an international natural resource graduate program. And I taught courses in that subject and did a lot of research. But I had a 9-month appointment, so I could spend 3 months out of the year working with the World Bank and groups like that.
And then in 1982, I started my own company with a friend of mine from England, and we had located a tool and die maker in Ventura who had invented a small labeling system for putting labels on fruits and vegetables. So we got the marketing and manufacturing rights. We ended up with 85% of the world's commercial labeling of fruits and vegetables. That business allowed me to see the world, because we did labeling in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, you name it, we did labeling of fruits and vegetables there.
I joined a group that the World Bank chairs. It's called the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, and it has 14 centers around the world, and so I, as a member of the Science Council of this group, I got to visit all of those centers every couple of years.
My father was with the Texas company, which was an oil company, and he was a field geologist. He was actually one of the people who found the Cuyama oil field. So we used to come up here and stay at Anderson's hotel out there in Buellton, Pea Soup Anderson's. Or we'd stay down. My father's best friend was Joe Hollister, who was one of the Hollisters on the Santa Ynez Ranch. And I can remember going out to the Hollister Ranch and riding Joe's Farmall tractors. And
Joe would actually take us out in the evening, coon hunting.
Yeah.
And he'd go in his Jeep and go over the sand dunes and down on the beach, My earliest memories of this area, probably the main memory, was the Bucardi's Dairy Old man Bacardi had these peacocks. He could command them to flip their tails, and I was just fascinated as a little kid. Remember, I was 6 years old when we moved to Denmark, so I don't have many memories from around here.
After the war, Gulf Oil was looking for a U.S.-trained geologist who spoke Danish. And my father was the only one they could find in this world that had those qualifications, so they invited him to go to Denmark and run their exploration program in Scandinavia. And we went to Denmark in 1945 in August, right after the war ended. When we got there, we spoke no Danish. And my parents put us in a Danish school. You know, we were 6 and 8 or 6 and 7, and when we lived there for 6 years, and we had problems when we came back. I actually was put back a grade in school when I came back to the U.S. because my English was so bad. So, and we still speak Danish together, and I speak it to the dog.
Buddy, come here. Come here. Good.
My father's favorite restaurant in Solvang was Møllekrogen. That's the inn of the mill. And it was a good Danish restaurant for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden the proprietor retired. It became a Mexican restaurant. Now it's a Vietnamese restaurant. And so that's sort of a reflection on the kind of change that's happening in Solvang.
Of course, when we first came here, it was not at all a tourist town. Now it's pretty much a tourist town. Solvang and Los Olivos is a wine-tasting tourist town, and Solvang's becoming that. And that's not all bad, because, I mean, the opportunities that were here, if they had not had that Life magazine article that talked about this quaint little Danish village, you know, they probably wouldn't have had the tourism business, and you know, who knows what would have happened here. And some people will say, well, it would have been good if it didn't change, but I happen to believe it's probably good that it changed. And, you know, one can say, well, that's sad, but it's, you know, part of change and progress, which you have to expect. I might recommend Matt Ridley on TED Talks. And he said, so cooperation, trade, and learning from the past, those are the three things that are going to give you some optimism about the future.